Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Supercoach Challenges, and today we'll be looking at some trade plans as we try to figure out what we're going to do here, because it's a big round to be making trades and I'm honestly not sure what to do myself. So as you can see, this is the team set out from the end of last week. I've been playing around with a lot of trade plans. I'm just really not sure where to go. It's going to be a hard week, and I think there's a lot of different ways we could go. We can move back towards the pack and pick some players that are pretty popular, or we could try and pick up on some of the players that people haven't moved to thus far. For me, I'm thinking I probably still have to play a little bit different because I am so far back in the pack. I think if you're in a good position, you could probably just try and consolidate your position. For me, being in the 40k, I want to try and get as high as I can. So I really want to try and do something different, maybe getting a player who can or a couple of players who can kind of do some different things for the teams, open up money elsewhere, and try and work something out for the team. So originally what I was looking to do, and these are probably the three players I'm just going to go with anyway, were Grundy, Jordan, and Howe's out. And the reason being, obviously, Jordan, he's probably made all the cash he could. It's probably a good time to get rid of him. He's got the buy. Grundy, bit the same. Like, he's just kind of going nowhere as a ruck, and I think a lot of people are going to move off him. And then Howe's is just, he's obviously playing, but he's just not really performing where we need to be now that they've moved Salem back. So, and he could go down money this week, and then he has the bye next week. So it's kind of an easy one to move on. So, firstly, because this is the piece of the puzzle that needs to be fit first, I was going to go with Marshall, and then I was looking at getting Closey, as a lot of people are doing. Get that out. And then I was looking for a defender, and the way I was doing that was by going Lazaro, Dacos, and I would have liked to go either Whitfield or McGovern. But as you can see, I just missed out on the cash for both of these players with this move. This would have probably been the perfect move and the safest move, but it is not to be. And I don't mind, because it is kind of helping me to make a decision as to whether I want to go Marshall now or not. So that is something I've been thinking about. So that was the first plan. So to do that, I tried to look and see if this is worth it with the players I can afford. And looking at the averages, Clark is interesting. I just don't know if I've got the balls to go there with not really any real previous history of scoring. Apple, I just don't think, he's pretty old as well, so he could slow down at any point. I have run Blakey before. I reckon 2 years ago when he was like 300k, I ran Blakey and he went like 80s or 90s, but would have been nice to get a bit more. But he is very interesting, but I'd probably, I think like next year probably be his year where he really pushes that premium spot. And I actually really like Yo. And it's the one I've been playing with the most. But the only reason I like Yo is I actually watched his game against Sydney and he looked really, really good. And he doesn't look like he's as hampered as previous years. Another good thing, he's got the defensive mid, so I can easily swap him with Dacos later on. Other reasons that it is best 18, so even if he does get injured, which could be, could occur, we would at least hopefully have his score hidden. And he's also got a fairly low break even, I think. 67, not too bad. So yeah, Yo's one. He showed that he can go big scores last weekend. He does look good in their midfield. And yeah, that was probably the one I've played around the most. So Yo's probably the player I like the most at that price. But the problem is I'm not sure he's necessarily going to be top 8, top 10 defender. And that's probably the biggest issue. Like, he's probably pushing 8 best. But like, there could be other players and I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to Young yet. And forgive him. for the start of the season. I don't know. I feel like I'd rather just let that one play out now that I've got rid of him. And then below that, there isn't much else. So the other option I have is going the forward line because the midfield is strong. I don't really want to touch the midfield at the moment. That's something that will maybe get fixed or moved around at DPP. But like guys like Bonner, Roberts, Supercoach, and Sanders, I want to kind of try and get on the field all of them each week because they're going to score so well. So going a midfield premium isn't really a spot. So it's like, all right, do I look at the forward line now? The forward line is just as bare. And like, looking at these averages of players, we've got Comben, who you'd want to see another week before you go him. I think he's not losing his position. And I actually did watch his last game in the VFL. I went back and watched the tape to see how they were playing him, and he has been playing defence the whole time, taking a lot of marks, and he was a bit of a general bat there for them in the VFL. So it's not like this position's new to him. It probably is a new role this year, but he has been playing it in their simulation in the VFL, and he could continue to do quite well. And if you look at his heat map, it's like all marks in the back, full back, pretty much area. So he's definitely playing that role, just trying to sweep across the back, looking for cutoff marks and stuff like that. But I'd probably still want to. I'm probably happy to wait one more week. I'd probably rather Closey just because going him now probably opens up a bit more cash than what Comben does. So going from there, like looking at averages, surely this is price adjusted. No. All right. So yeah, this just shows how bare it is when you've got like Mackay. I mean, the good thing about Mackay is he's in a team that's winning and he's kicking straight this year. So I wouldn't. It's hard to pay 500k for him now. I think when he was 400, it probably was worth the risk, but now it's like hard to think a key forward like Mackay, you're paying 500. It just seems so against what we did. Same with Hogan. Zorko, I would like if he wasn't so injury prone. And then below that, it's like Max King, who, I mean, he's got a low break even at least, but, and St Kilda do look all right, but GWS is going to put Taylor to him, who's done really well. I think they put a highlight out today where it was like he has won every one-on-one contest he's had, something ridiculous like that. Georgiades could be an interesting rookie next week as well. And actually one that I really played with a lot was Shai Bolton, because I read something saying that, or one of my mates said that he was going to be going to the midfield, that Uze had been saying they want to try and get him more midfield time. And I was like, really like, oh, let's get on Bolton. Like, he's a pod, which is something good, like only 6% owned, with not many bringing him in this week, only 0.7%. And he's got West Coast with a low break even. So it's like, well, this looks like a really good game for him. The only problem is he's got the bye next week. So you're bringing him in for one game to then lose his score the next week, which doesn't feel great, because I was going to go Bolton, Marshall, Closey, and I was looking at that for pretty much the whole week. And then, I don't know, just with the bye, it's just like if he goes badly, which I doubt because he's against West Coast, but it doesn't feel great. And there's been so much good media around Bolton, like Taranto's been talking about how good he's looked, and, they've been pumping up for ages. And he started to score well. Now, the funny thing is that his CBAs actually went down last week against St Kilda, which is probably because Dusty was back and he scored his best. So, I mean, I know he kicked 4 goals though, so that affects that. But, pretty interesting to see how Richmond play Bolton going forward. So, this was the first trade. So, if I went the Yo trade as well, I was looking at some, how my trades would shape up, and I went into this Excel I created to just kind of figure out how round 5, round 6, round 7 would look. So looking at round 5, and this was actually without doing Marshall. So what I did was I went, all right, if we want to do something different and we want to take advantage of some cash, so let's have a look at Meek. So I went back and looked at Meek, and I went and looked at his VFL numbers, which his hit out numbers weren't great. And also I looked at his numbers on the weekend and he got 30 hitouts, which was pretty interesting for a guy whose VFL hitouts weren't great. So I guess in the last video, or actually, or the review, I kind of said about how Meek has previously struggled for Hawthorn as the ruck to score well, which was shown in like a small amount last year. And the problem with having Reeves as the backup. But as the week's gone on, I've kind of wanted to look into Meek's gameplay more this year to kind of see how it's changing and whether it could be a way to get some more cash to be able to then get another premium in and try and use him as a midway stepping stone to then get up in the future to one of these bigger rucks and get a bit more time to watch Marshall in English, because Ross was saying about potentially bringing in Campbell to help Marshall because he's been feeling a bit tired. And then English is also sharing a lot of the ruck with Darcy, who he didn't share much with last week, but did the previous week. So could his average drop back to like 110, 115 instead of 130 is the problem. So and English is 690, and I do like English a little bit better just because he's always been the burner guy who just seems like he's got probably that big ceiling. But I guess Marshall could as well, especially if he doesn't have these this other ruck coming in, and he's got more of a 100% ruck role at the moment. So then I was like, well, let's have a look at Meek and see what he can do. And I went back and watched the last half of the game last week because I believe that's where most of his Supercoach points came from. And it was, funnily enough, it wasn't necessarily the ruck. I mean, he did really well in the ruck contest, but it was a lot of his follow-up work and also his it's just his actual movement around the ground is where he scores. He's more of an English type scorer rather than your tap ruckman type scorer like a Wiz. And I think one of the things I flagged I was worried about was his matchups in the coming weeks as well. So just to look at that, Meek's matchup for a ruck next week is Wiz, which was something I was worried about because he's obviously, Witz is a dominant ruck for hitouts, and it feels like one where he might get dominated. So he's got Witz, then he's got Sherry, and then he's got Grundy. Like, these are probably the five, other than Gorn, the ruckman you don't want to see. Now, there's a lot of conjecture around the Geelong game. He only scored 88 against Conway and then 130 against Cox and Cameron, who aren't necessarily the best ruckman, or defensively scoring ruckman anyway. Restrictive scoring, I should say. But I think with the Geelong one, you could, like, as I was saying, he's not necessarily a guy who scores from the taps. He's a guy who scores from his around the ground work. And that Geelong game got very, very wet, which meant that the ball was pretty much pinging back and forth. It was hard to take marks. And there were a lot more ruck contests, but as I said, doesn't necessarily win points off his ruck. It's more off his around the ground work. Whereas against Collingwood, they didn't have that issue, and his scoring reflected that. Especially, he does get a few more clearances, and he does look like he is putting like in effort. He wants to try and get around the ball and help them to win. Now, this is where I then went and had a look, and I thought, well, we just had, and this isn't going to load, which is brilliant, but we just watched Witz dominate a ruckman in Briggs, who was a guy we all brought in. Well, a lot of people brought in last year. I didn't. Apparently, the DFS website doesn't want to work, so that's good. Maybe it's just that website. But anyway, pretty much I had a look at the heat maps to kind of see what was going on. Is it going to load? Nope. Okay. Anyway, when I had a look at the heat maps, Witt's heat map against Briggs was all through the middle. It's going to load now. So I'll just show you what it kind of looked like. Should have had this up earlier, but that's all right. So if we look at the heat maps from last week, this week, so Witt's, actually, I'll show you Briggs as well. Because I think this shows where we could see that that Meek could actually score quite well still. So Briggs, and open up. Okay, it doesn't want to do it that way. So we got Wits, we got Briggs, and then we have let me get into Meeks. Wish this didn't default to fantasy. So if we look at their games last week, and I don't really think this was affected necessarily by the game style either. I feel like these two teams kind of like the ball would have been moving out kind of way. So if we look at Wits, a lot of his balls through the middle. Same with Briggs, like the ball was staying a lot around the middle, whereas when we look at Meek, he was kind of going a lot more around the ground, and he's actually taking a lot of disposals in the back line as well. So this could be a point where maybe we see Meek being able to work a bit harder than what Wits does, because Wits does go forward, and I guess he did get one disposal in the forward line, but Meek seems to move around and get the ball a lot more around. Now, I know it's probably different game style, but at the same time, it kind of shows you that maybe Wits, Meek might be able to outwork Wits around the ground, because Wits isn't the most mobile ruckman either. And considering Meek doesn't score his points from general ruck contests, maybe that's somewhere that he can actually do all right in. So anyway, I thought, well, Meek looked good in his last game. I had a look at his stats, and they didn't look too bad in the VFL as well. Although Reeves' last game in the VFL was really, really good. So there is someone knocking on the door. I think that's the biggest issue I have with the Meek pick. So is the job security. The one thing that protects it is the fact that Meek has a very low break even. Like if he steps on, he's making money. So if he goes to 61, he's making 34K. If this goes to like an 80, like he's probably making 60K in a week, and that's severely not 60K, sorry. He's probably making 50K, but that severely de-risks the pick going forward, and he probably has another low break even. So that is something I like about Meek. North also, he could actually do all right around the ground against North, even though Jerry's probably a bit more of a mobile ruckman, I would say, and Grundy definitely is. Marvel is undercover as well, so there's no chance of, Rain disrupting that, and North like to ping the ball back and forth. Remember last year when I watched the North St Kilda game where Jack Siebel went and scored 170 as a defender because St Kilda and them just kept kicking it back and forth, and maybe that's somewhere that Meek could actually do fairly well. I think the argument was made with Meek is that his midfield wasn't as good as Briggs, but as I said, he's not a tap ruckman necessarily. Like he's a follow-up ruckman who pressures around the ground, who gets, runs onto balls, and he was running onto balls against Collingwood and getting clearances for them. So hopefully he can do that against Wits and just outwork him and hopefully put up a big score. So in saying that, I looked at it. So it was going to be Meek, and then I thought, well, originally it was Yo, but I'm kind of moving towards a different player who I will go over as well. And then this kind of left it open to whoever I wanted as the backup, but I went with Closey as well. The reason being is it just left a lot of cash in the bank. Was this the trade plan I went with here? How's Grundy? Oh no, I was going with Tom Brown. But Closey was the cash choice as well. So the reason for Brown is that even though he's already 230K, I still think that he'd be worthwhile just for his scoring potential. I know Closey's going to have good scoring as well, but I'm thinking I might trade Hoare next week. That was probably the plan if I did this. And Closey's not Brown. So Brown will be by next week, which will suck, but you'll have Closey to come in that will cover this spot anyway, and it's best 18, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, I just think that like if he averages 70-ish, he's still going up like 150K from here, 130K, which is good money. Get rid of him close to the bye. He's probably made 150k. He seems to be able to score well. He's a really good kick. I don't know. I just think there's a little bit of upside left in Brown. And he's a guy a lot of overlooking because of these other picks as well, being Comben and Closey. So, what happens if Comben goes 20 next week and Closey gets injured, and people have brought him in early? At least with Brown, he's already played. He's going up cash. So, I could, in the next 2 games, he could make 80k just going 70s, and be, 300k by the time they've had one price rise. I mean, I know it'll be 100k at that point, probably for Closey. For Comben, maybe 50 or 60 after that next game, but could get them both in anyway next week, and that's where I kind of fit into the plan. So this is what I looked at. I look forward the 3 rounds because this DPP round is going to make a lot of changes. It's where players are going to be able to be moved from this midfield into the back line, because I want to be able to keep this open so that the back line can be, once Mass and Williams reach them, the high cash potential, we can then cover them with these guys. So the yellow's moving position. So Dacos is going to here. This is a Jordan trade out is red. So we got Jordan, Howard, Grundy, and then Meek, Brown, and Yo. So doing this with the salary I had would leave us with 191k to make these trades. And then moving forward next week, I used, so trade in, trade out. I used the price estimates given by, what's it called? Supercoach Gold. It's not Supercoach Gold, is it? Whatever it is. Anyway, and I looked at what the prices would be for the players I want to target. So with the money we have, I think Mass could potentially max out. He's only going to go up 15k this week if he hits 60. If he goes below that, it's his price could be starting to hit his break even, which is scoring could hit his break even. So that could be something, and he could become out of favor if he even get dropped. We don't know yet. So the trade the next week kind of took into account Lazaro not playing and then Hall going to Closey, which with these 3 players, I was then going to be able to bring in Comben, Closey, and Dawson. And the reason for Dawson is I think that will be pretty much his low. I want to get Dawson next week as well because he'll play Carlton, and then he has Essendon North, Port, who he always loves to stand up against. Brisbane will probably be a hard one. Then Collingwood, West Coast, Hawthorn, Richmond, and even Sydney, his old team. That's a really nice run. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably 8 games where he's going really, really well. And I feel like after this Carlton game, he's probably bottomed out, and Crows start to get a nicer run of games where they might be able to get a bit more of a score on the board and a bit more of a run over teams a bit more in the midfield, which should help his scoring. So I really would like to get Dawson next week, which is the plan. So this plan, in doing that, left me with 7,300, another boost used. So I would have, I believe I've written over here how many boosts would be left. So that would bring in Dawson. Dacos would get moved back to the back line, which would leave Williams and Brown, but Closey would be the one on because Brown would have the bye. And then we could reset for another week. Combat in for Lazaro, leaving me with 7,300. And this was I think Dawson's estimate is actually lower than 540. So he's actually estimated to lose 24, which would take him to 332. But I'd normally go, 532. I normally go, you know what, I reckon he could score a 120, 130. What would that look like? Be a bit more realistic. It still leaves me 7,300. So even if he reaches around about break even, I'll still be around about the mark to be able to make the trades work. And then moving forward from there, it was going to round 7 when the DPP hits. And I think that's where I'd look to trade Bonner. And as you can see, there are a lot of position moving as players. So Martin would come from the midfield. He'd go to here in the back line, which would mean that Sheasel, Yo, NWM, Dacos, and Martin would be the back line with Closey and Brown as those 2 mid defenders that I'd loop with Reed until he's back. McKercher would come on off the bench. Bonner would go out Sanders would get on field as well. And then we would look for a rookie, 123k rookie. I'd normally go there because that's probably the rookies we kind of look at, but it could be lower, onto the bench. And then we'd have Rankin, Power, Reed would go onto the bench. Wilson, oh yeah, that's right. Reed would go on the bench here. Wilson would come up here. And then we'd have Flanders come on, and this actually rookie could come down here to make the Wilson move work. And then we could bring in Flanders because I think the estimate for Flanders was going up 16k next week, and then what is it, 18k the week after. And I estimated based on 20k each week, so he scores a bit above what they think he's going to score, which would bring him for 592 and still leave 11k in the bank to be able to make these trades work. And that would be with 2 trades instead of 3. So that would leave me with 25 trades left. And this is what the team I would estimate to look like. So it's going to come over more? No. Why is it? All right, Sheets is bad, but anyway, it would leave Sheasel, Yo, NWM, Dacos, Martin. So Green are the keepers. I don't know why Sheets does this, but anyway, the bench would be Closey, Reed, Brown. So I'd only need one more upgrade here. The midfield would be this, with Hewitt being a maybe keep depending on how he's going, but he's also would hopefully be about 500k, so not the most expensive upgrade either. McKercher, Sander, Roberts here, which I don't mind. Like, they all score quite well. And even then, we could look to move any of these on as need be. Like, it could be a McKercher down, Hewitt up type thing, and that would still leave us with a lot of cash, I reckon. And then Meek. So at some point, we'd have to upgrade Meek. I'm not sure when. If we ever see a Nankervis injury, I'll be trading Livingston to him straight away, because that's just money in the bank we're going to need as well. And then the forward line would be Rankin, Power, Flanders, Heaney, and then these last 2 spots would be Comben, Darcy, and then Reed and Cadman on the bench. So at that point, it's quite good. The only problem I really have is I'm not sure, as I said, that Yo's that top 8. It would leave me with 8 upgrades, 25 trades, with two trades per upgrade, around 16 trades used there and 9 trades left over, which could be used to maybe put some players on the field, etc. An extra player on the bench. So like an M9 or D7. So that was the moves to round 7 as well. It would also leave me with 11,500 in the bank. Actually, I don't know if that's worked. Sorry, this is based off this. Obviously, it's just this is highlighted more. So that was where I kind of got to. But then obviously the problem was Yo. I wasn't really sure about that in the long term, and that made me turn to someone else who plays for West Coast, however, a bit more expensive, being Jeremy McGovern, who's 4.3%, and he is owned by, and he is 555k. The difference and the reason why McGovern is probably maybe a little bit better is that he's getting kickouts now. He's the general back there. He's in less teams, which kind of adds a little bit more risk, but is also good to get on earlier than other teams. And this is also good for Yo, but if you've looked at West Coast run, he's actually had the hard run already. So West Coast have had Port, GWS, Bulldogs, Sydney. 3 of these are probably top 6 teams, and the Dogs are probably pushing for top 8. But after this, they have Richmond once, they have Essendon twice, they have St Kilda twice, who've already let defenders score big, North twice. I feel like Gold Coast could be quite good for a defender to score on, and Geelong have been all right. Like, this is actually a really decent run. Melbourne, it's not like they've got a really good forward line that's going to make McGovern have to lock down on a big forward. Like, they've got Brown, but Barras can take him, which means McGovern can kind of float. So I really, really like the West Coast run, and it's one of the reasons why I kind of want to either get McGovern or Yo in, and I'm going more McGovern just based on the role being that back line, um, intercepting marker who gets kick-ins, but Yo's role is also good. I mean, it's only about 75% CBAs, and whether he starts to get tired and they need to switch him around is my only issue with Yo. So at the moment, I'd like to go McGovern. I'm not 100% sure on going Brown. That's another decision I have to make. It could be that instead of Brown, I just bring in Closey, and then that leaves us with decisions to be made next week. 236K in the bank. So I can easily go, Bonner will be easily able to go up to Dawson in one trade if I want next week. Who's the guy I'm really aiming for, I think, next week. I think he's going to be at the sweet spot. I think you could go for more expensive players, but I think, for me, I'm probably going to have to jump on these premiums that are a little bit cheaper earlier, that other people necessarily won't be jumping on potentially, and ride them back up, hopefully, and then move on players as they fall, etc., and try and play that way, because I am a bit behind in team value. I'm a bit behind in points. I'm going to have to try and go potty with my premiums and, get a week or two before everyone gets on them where they go big, and then have everyone chasing me rather than me chasing them. I could go and look at, the most traded in. Can I get this bigger actually? So if I go top, my all coaches. So if we look at the, they probably can do trading. I just don't know how. But anyway, if I go down here and look at the most traded in for all coaches, so we got Closey and Horn Francis. I could go there. Meek. See, it's only 3%. I think I'll go down here. This is better. I'll Meek's in my team, but I think he's only like 3.3%. I could go to Flanders, but I don't mind taking a stab against Flanders still. I feel like he's becoming the Baker of Gold Coast at the moment, where Dimmer moves him wherever he needs. And he got to 40 quick in the first quarter last week, and then he didn't score anything at all for like a quarter, and he really sat on that score, and then he pumped again in the last two. So I don't know, it could be one where he keeps getting moved around as they try and fit in other players and figure out where other players could play, and Flanders could start to get negatively effective and be hit with that Baker type role for Gold Coast instead. So, a guy can play anywhere, that Dimmer likes to play anywhere, and gets affected from a super coach position. So, and he's 550K, which, for a forward that, I mean, I guess he's probably worth it, especially with his scores now, and it's probably stupid passing him up, but I don't know, you got to go different somewhere, don't you? I'm not sure about the Horn Francis trade, because I don't really see him as a keeper, and he doesn't look like getting forward status. So I don't really know about bringing him in. I'm happy to wait on, but I do like his role. Graham, again, like to wait on, and Sharp, Sharp could still make a lot of money. It's really annoying that I passed him up at the start of the year for Clark instead, because I did have Sharp in my team for a lot of the preseason, and then when I him in, his scores have been actually really good. It's kind of surprising maybe he didn't reach the field, just because McKerchig, Robertson, and Sanders had been scoring so much better. I guess North and Adelaide were quite easy matchups, and even Brisbane in that first game weren't the greatest. But Carlton was a big game, and they did lose that, so it's good to see him score big in that. But if he goes a couple 80s, he could make another 100K yet, which is still good, but probably one we just have to pass up there. So, yeah, as you can see, there's a lot going on. I'll optimize this now. So, as far as VCs go, I'm still sticking with Gawn into Bont. Bont against Essendon just seems really good, and Gawn had a 200 on Brisbane last year, which was against Omax, so I think I'm just going to back that in as well. Yeah, so this is the team as it stands. I'm still not 100% set on this Meek trade, but the only other option is going up to Rowan, and it's I guess Meek allows me to get McGovern on, and if McGovern can average more than Yo by about 10 or so points, it might become even with Marshall. I don't know. Like, getting Marshall doesn't really allow me much wiggle room into keepers that I actually want, which is probably the hard part. The only thing I could look at is if I didn't go this and I went, sorry, Closey. This is just a quick one that I'll have a look at. So minus Closey, and then we go, you're back here. The problem I have with this as well is I like moving Dacos out because it gets an extra player in the field, whereas getting a midfielder isn't going to do that because forward line and midfield are actually full. But if I go Rowan, what's in the midfield that's interesting at this price? This is nearly Dawson, to be honest, but I don't think there's much that you actually want to keep. It's just Horn Francis, Crouch, who I think at some point is going to get moved from the midfield. Martin, like if I didn't have Martin, he'd be the one I'd be jumping on that, but I do. And then it's just Yo. I don't think Warner's quite there, and the Sydney midfield is pretty packed, so I don't really like that necessarily. Below that, there's nothing really here that you really want to go on. I mean, Holmes could be going to get defender status, so if you have held him, it might not necessarily be the worst. He could slide into a D6 role for you. But outside of that, yeah, not much here. So that's why I'm kind of leaning towards that meat trade, doing something a bit different. And it's why I watched a lot of his game on the weekend to kind of figure out what's going on with him. So for now, I'm going to set that, and then that's going to allow me more time to look at what's going on with the big boys up the top. And I think now the only thing, I think I'm happy with maybe Meek and McGovern, maybe Yo, maybe. I might go watch some more of Yo from the previous weeks because I did watch the Sydney West Coast game because I was watching Reed quite closely. And McGovern actually. But Yo does tempt me. I just need to see if, you know, his time on ground's good and he doesn't look tired because he does have that midfield defender status, which kind of makes him a little bit easier to move around as well. And then figuring out which rookie I want to go, whether it's Brown, whether it's Closey, or I could even go Comben, really. If we're going to look at Brown, I might as well look at Comben as well. So to end it, I guess that's all I've got to say. So this was a bit of a ramble of a video, but I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you kind of maybe got some ideas with how you can look at your team going forward, maybe create your own spreadsheet and kind of try and map it out, because I think this might be the most important week of the competition, because I think there's a lot of different ways teams can go, whether they bring in rookies early, because, you know, say, you know, a lot of the competition are bringing closely. I think it's like 30%. What is it? 4% have him already, 26%. So 30% are going to have him. What happens if he gets injured? Everyone's got a 102k midfielder. Defender who's injured now. And most of them probably have Hoare or Reed or Gibkiss and Reed or Caulfield and someone. Like, there's a lot of dead rookies on our defender bench, and I don't know, it just kind of makes me want to just wait on Closey 1 week and just see what happens with him. But at the same time, doing this would allow me just to go straight to Dawson, no issues next week as well. So that's also a positive. So I'm going to ponder that, and hopefully that's left you with some tips anyway onto how you can look at this. I know I said don't go meat, but you do a bit more research, you have a look a bit more into players, and it can change your mind. I'd say this is high risk, but it is also high reward. I remember previous years I went on Himmelberg earlier than most people did 2 years ago on the forward line, and that, I think, helped me get my run from probably what was going to be 25k to like top 5, so 5k, which, you know, isn't the best, but it's still up there. You know, there's 120,000 teams, so it's not too bad. So I'll leave you with that. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.